Welcome, sinners.
Yeah, hello everyone. Welcome back to Friend Credits. As you can tell, we're getting into something special today. The theme is nun movies. So, sister, tell us what we're in for.
Today we're in for a huge haul of Nunsploitation films. How did we start this collection?
Okay, so what happened was I was interested in seeing Immaculate. And Immaculate at the time, it came out in 2024. I think it was freshly out of theaters, but there was not a 4K Blu-ray. Mm-hmm. Now there is a 4K Blu-ray for it. But I had to import this crazy German media book that we were really impressed by.
Yeah, it's some of the better packaging I've seen because not only is it really well done, but it incorporates the booklet of all the information into the actual binding of everything.
Yeah, we then had to compare it to the First Omen, which I've erroneously been calling the Last Omen, that for whatever reason we thought was fascinating that these very similar movies came out in the same year. Weirdly enough, that's one of the last nun movies we watched because it still does not have a 4K Blu-ray that I'm aware of. I ended up having to get like a regular Rotten Tomatoes Blu-ray of it. Mm-hmm. But same year, virtually the same plot. Those fall into a category of young woman decides to take the cloth, but she gets pregnant with the Anit-Christ via demons, and the other nuns are bad guys. Spoiler alert.
Yes.
In serendipitous, so too we came to that conclusion, that direction, from our Natasha Kinski viewing, because back in the day, she was in this crazy movie, To the Devil, a Daughter.
Yes.
Which I also had to get a copy of just in the standard blue format. But this stars Christopher Lee as well. I mean, this is a crazy movie.
And it's a Hammer film.
Yeah, 1976. That's what I was looking on the back of it for. So this surely was not the first movie to utilize that trope, right? But we have it here in 3 examples. That's one side of the nun spectrum. Mm-hmm. Young nun, sexual awakening, coming of age, getting impregnated with what would be the Antichrist.
Against her will.
Against her will. There's a cult.
Yes. She's not quite sure what's happening until the very end.
I don't know that was the case in To the Devil, a Daughter. I think she was more or less aware. I think it's left more ambiguous. These other movies, not so much.
Yeah, and spoilers, but I think a really interesting difference between Immaculate and The First Omen and To the Devil, a Daughter and something like maybe Rosemary's Baby is that at the end of Immaculate, she runs away, she has the baby by herself in like the middle of a field or something in the woods, and I think she kills it immediately. She's just like, fuck you. And there's something so gratifying about Sydney Sweeney being like, no, I will not let this Antichrist live. I don't care if it's my baby. My mother instinct is not kicking in. I'm going to smash its head in. And I really did enjoy that about Immaculate.
Yeah, that's a good point. Another movie kind of adjacent to them would be Rosemary's Baby.
Yes, yes.
A weird bunch, though. And you know what I mean when I say surely there's some movie from the 50s that has the same plot. If you told me that it was based on a Renaissance novel, I'd go, oh, okay. You know?
Yeah.
But these are nearly identical movies. I think that of all of them, perhaps, my favorite was The First Omen.
Really?
There's a lot. I get addicted to the compare and contrast.
Right.
Both Immaculate and The First Omen had really great nun footage. Cloister settings with pea gravel and old stone walls and archways.
Quella grigia!
Clarissa? Yes? What is it? May I borrow your hat for a while? My face is going to break out all over. It's terrible.
But the First Omen raised the bar on several levels in that regard.
Yes, some really artistic shots in that film.
Funny enough, this doesn't just come down to the director, but when I looked it up, Immaculate had a male director, the same guy that worked with Sydney Sweeney to direct The Voyeurs. So that was, you can imagine that crew, that kind of visual, the craft that they bring to the table.
Totally.
Female director for The First Omen, Arkasha Stevenson. Her other credits have been episodes of television, etc., and she directed an episode of that show, Brand New Cherry Flavor, about the female director in Hollywood.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, so
Cool.
I don't know which episode she directed, but I think to come from that, to have this be your first big feature, I was super impressed. I really liked The First Omen of all of these movies because it had, something that we've seen before, the plot that we kind of could tell what was coming. I mean, again, To the Devil a Daughter might not be as well made. It may be one of my more favorite ones, but
Yes.
but The First Omen was just super well crafted.
And to compare it to Immaculate, there's not as much motivation for why Sydney Sweeney is going to be the Antichrist's mother, whereas in The First Omen, it really delves into why the main character is going to carry this baby and why she is the chosen mother figure.
Yeah.
And you really feel like, okay, yeah, they deserve that. They earned that.
They do a little bit more back lore in regards to the plot.
Yeah.
It kind of reminds me of course, the Da Vinci Code, but it also had a little bit of Gore Verbinski's A Cure for Wellness. Remember that whole plot, that
Yeah,
gross
totally.
plot? And they all have really intense scenes of birth and or demon rape.
Ooh, yeah.
So
Oh, yeah.
you sign up for that, but they're more or less palatable. Another movie that's kind of a bridge to the other genre that we have represented here is Benedetta.
Which is my favorite of the bunch.
Okay, then tell us about
Yes. Benedetta, which is based on a true figure in history, a nun named Benedetta, who
it. Sister Benedetta.
Sister Benedetta, who for many years was just a normal nun and then just started having these really intense visions that were highly documented. They were written about in a book about her life years later, and you kind of wonder, were they kind of filling in the blanks, or was this really documented at the time?
Like
But
Marco Polo.
Yeah, exactly. Or like, how Homer wrote about the Odyssey. It's like there's many years in between, but it's considered a primary source. And she had these very intense, very specific visions. She had a intense lesbian relationship with one of the other nuns in the convent. She had a marriage to Jesus. And another thing that she had that I find is interesting because it connects to Behind Convent Walls is she had the stigmata, which is they are bodily wounds, scars, and pain which appear in the locations corresponding to the crucifixion wounds of Jesus Christ. The hands, the wrists, the feet, near the heart, and the head. And in Benedetta, she awakes with them. I think in the movie they kind of show her inflicting them upon herself.
Yeah, okay.
And I kind of like that. I think that Verhoeven does a really good job of kind of showing that she was kind of going for it. She knew what she was kind of doing.
Yeah.
And then in Behind Convent Walls, a nun in that gives herself the stigmata, but then says, oh, it just came to me,
It was your blessed mother. His blood. The blood of Jesus. I have Jesus' wounds.
Classic trope. I think if
Classic
you
trope.
were even a a boy and not a nun,
Yeah.
you would do the stigmata too, to be like,
Yeah.
can't help it. I feel like that was even on the Silver Globe to some extent.
Yeah, totally. And I just love that concept of, oh, this figure is having these visions and they're having these godly communications, and then it all comes to a head and they're put through a trial and it's found that they were faking it the whole time.
Yeah.
And it's just like, was there ever a time where someone was found to not be faking it? Was there ever a time where they were believed? I think in all these stories of these women trying to gain power through being connected to God through these visions, it always ends up with them getting a trial and then being like executed for lying.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little conundrum because what makes it a worthy tale, right?
Yeah.
Just being a typical nun. There's two ways I look at this.
Mm-hmm.
That way, and then where I've kind of come to it from, I have no clue about nuns or the culture, Catholicism. So this, ignorance that I bring to the table, I can't help but think, wow, what have nuns done to deserve this treatment that we've seen on display here? And yeah, and most of them, they're conniving nuns, they're lusty nuns. We'll get into that in a minute. But I mean, think about if we have 7 movies here, probably 5 of them feature someone falling to their death from a height and or jumping or being thrown out of a window.
Yeah, true.
So the image of a nun being thrown out of a window must have been so burned into the psyche of these filmmakers.
Yeah.
And then they could only be the tip of the iceberg.
It's all for you. No, don't!
One interesting tidbit from the special features of Killer Nun was an interview with the director Giolo.
The devil.
That's the devil made me sneeze.
The devil made me sneeze.
You didn't say bless you, sister.
Bless you.
Oh, thank you.
Blessings upon you.
The special features of Killer Nun had an interview with the director Giolo Bertolucci.
Of course, Giolo Bertolucci.
It's like in Inglourious Basterds, Giolo Bertolucci.
Beyond Giorno.
And although, that was in the 1970s, I think we've had a huge shift. I'd love to see numbers of nuns. Percentage per capita of people taking the cloth since the 1970s. Surely it's dipped.
Plummeted, I'm sure.
But he said growing up that you were really, in Italy, a Catholic state. It was Catholic through and through. No one was not Catholic. They even owned half of the movie theaters in Italy.
Wow.
So if you made an anti-Catholic film, it was non-viable in their kind of shrinking film industry. So you can imagine that these come from the minds of people who were the
Provocateurs.
I was going to say the victims of nuns.
Sure,
because
that too.
to be painted in this light is, how could it be undeserved?
It's surely deserved. We all have heard the stories of nuns, beating children at Catholic schools and being extremely harsh and doling out really bad punishments.
Yeah, we more or less, see them in this. We have punishments of being locked in a closet. We have punishments of probably being stripped down naked once or twice in some of these movies.
Being whipped.
I don't even recall. It's a blur. We've been watching these movies for a long time.
Yeah.
So some of the earlier stuff in them, we had not yet connected the dots. Now we see, the mean mother who, storms in the room and confiscates the dildos.
Yeah, there's always the trope of the mean mother superior who is either, trying to bring about the Anit-Christ or just trying to keep you from getting your rocks off. And there's always the trope of the priest who comes in to lay down the law.
That's so true. Fred Armisen in Little Hours.
We're going to begin the tribunal.
The trope of course, lesbianism.
The jealous, second lieutenant sister.
Yes.
That keeps coming up. The one who's like, you're new here, I'm the favorite.
Yeah, totally.
I'm actually literally Mother Superior's daughter for some reason. How come?
Yeah. I'm not sure why she didn't choose me to birth the Antichrist, but I would have done it with a smile on my face.
Ci ero mandato qui direttamente dal paradiso. Aspettavamo con ansia il tuo arrivo, mia cara.
I'm sorry.
She says you're pretty.
Yeah, the confidant.
Yeah.
Well, I think we can get into the other type of movie that we have on display here.
Okay.
And Benedetta acts as that bridge.
Right. Totally.
It is, in a lot of ways, that confused satire that Paul Verhoeven does, where people don't realize it's satirical because he takes himself really seriously in a lot of ways. But what we do know is scathing satire, let's call it, are movies like Behind Convent Walls,
yes.
Killer Nun, and The Little Hours. We have a variety from satirical nun sex comedy to maybe not satirical, but somewhat sleazy erotic thriller starring a nun,
Yeah.
to straight up erotica
Yeah.
about and for nuns.
Yes.
And
Totally.
whereas Verhoeven has something that he wants to get into the Venice Film Festival.
Yes, and surely did, because
Stuff like that.
It's quite artistic.
Yeah, it's for TIFF.
Yes. And interestingly enough, Behind Convent Walls has the same cinematographer, Luciano Tovoli, as Suspiria.
No kidding.
Yes, and that's really interesting because Behind Convent Walls is filmed almost entirely handheld, and it really puts you in this kind of uneasy place when you're watching it.
Yeah, I really enjoyed its cinematography because it had this haziness to it.
Yeah.
And of course they have great settings. All of these take place in
course.
basically castles / nunneries, right? Medieval
Totally.
settings. But Behind Convent Walls makes it look like a nice sunny day, a place where they would sneak you in and you'd be happy to be snuck in.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Basically. And that's fitting on the also Little Hours more or less.
Yeah.
Little Hours is a little more quirkier.
Quirkier, for sure. And also I want to say about Convent Walls is that the woman who plays the good girl gone bad, who is the Mother Superior's niece, her name is Ligia Branice. I don't know, maybe that's probably pronounced totally wrong, but that's Braujwic's wife, who was in many of his a few of his films before this, but this was her last performance. She didn't act after this. I wonder if it has to do with the reception to the film, or she was just I'm over it.
Braujwic, we've watched more or less his entire erotic filmography now.
Yes.
Whether it's Immortal Tales, The Beast, Behind Convent Walls, The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mrs. Something Osborne. The long ones on one topic would be exhausting to star in.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, the Behind Convent Walls is we have sexy nuns playing with themselves as soon as any door closes.
They're taking their clothes off. They're unbuttoning a million buttons as soon as the door closes.
Even before, because there's a scene where they all ransack the church and are playing the organ while they kiss each other in the confessional. You know, it's a blast. It's a party. Are these sacrilegious? I don't know.
Yeah, of course they are.
Some of them are more based because they're no, we need to bring forth the Antichrist.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's so sacrilegious.
Sure.
To conceive the Antichrist. I get the impression from this Catholic strand that they're actually true Christians.
Interesting.
But from the amoral sexual stuff, I feel those people are no, let's just mock nuns and call them sluts and stuff.
Yeah, totally. And then that gets us kind of into the Little Hours, where that is the most obvious one, and because they're just being silly, they're giving these nuns dirty mouths, they're cursing out the people who work at the convent and saying, "Don't look at us." And that movie in particular brings in this other trope that we don't see in any of these other films, where, oh, they're actually witches. And they they have a group of witches, a convent. It's similar.
Dude, another nun movie is Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
Are there nuns in that?
Yeah, they get trapped and there's like slutty nuns.
Oh, yes.
We also, dude, in all of this nun stuff, we took a little break. I was like kind of sick of it.
Yeah.
And we continued the Severin All the Haunts Be Ours box set. And then the next movie in the box set happened to be Dark Waters, a nun movie. Couldn't escape it. And that movie, there was some witchcraft, devil type plot to bring a demon, all this slavery to demons, not real nuns, all that stuff.
Totally.
But the trope that Little Hours also brought in was that why are these girls nuns? A lot of the times it's because they were sent away maybe for being slutty. So more or less, you know, some of these movies it's because the girl was weird and the family sent her away. Some of them it's because they were orphans who grew up very devout. But some of them it was like, oh, we're sending our loose daughter to be locked away. When they have a scene in The Little Hours, who Jeff Baena was the director, recently passed. He died, and that kicked off including, unfortunately, I'd seen Little Hours, but when he died, I was like, oh, we're doing a whole nun thing. We should watch that too. He has a scene where Alison Brie is visited by her dad, and he goes, oh, give me some sugar. And there's little holes in the wall, and they touch pinkies. And that idea that, like, nuns can't, you know, they have that in Behind Coven Walls. He's supposed to wear glasses that blinds him to the nuns.
Yeah.
And you see an inverse in Behind Coven Walls where they're all, like, trying to draw his gaze and be slutty.
Yeah.
That same theme is brought up in Little Hours, where they scream at this guy and berate him, the groundskeeper, for even glancing at them.
Yeah.
It plays on those things that you're like, from all of these, I'm building an idea of real nun culture.
Right.
I can imagine that in medieval times, there were a lot of political deals, like they portray in The Little Hours, like are kind of portrayed in Behind Coven Walls. But that in the 70s, we had this total dropout of faith in Catholicism, perhaps. And so these people who had been slapped and beaten by nuns in the 50s and the 40s maybe now had this freedom to express like everything they hated about the church through the purity of their nuns being violated, right? How really, if you look closer, God's like the devil, man, like that vibe. And that's where these meet.
Yes.
You know, coming from someone who's totally ignorant about it, I was just like, huh, well, again, what have they done to deserve this?
Probably a lot. Lastly, we have Killer Nun, which kind of breaks the form of all of these movies. It is set in the 70s, starring Anita Ekberg, who's most famous for her role in La Dolce Vita. It's interesting because it takes place in a totally different setting than the rest of these, in a Catholic hospital, where the nuns are nurses and helping doctors and everything.
A little more bureaucracy.
It puts a little bit finer of a point on the fact that these nuns could just take a day off, go into the city, change into plain clothes, and pretend to not be a nun.
People almost had not considered that.
Yeah.
Dude, these movies bubble up with waves of feminism, surely. And so in the 70s saying like, yeah, take off your veil, go into town, put on like makeup, and like literally invite randos from the street to like dry hump you in the foyer of a random apartment building.
Yeah.
Apparently based on a real story, which must have caught on and blew people's minds that there was this nun who was illustrious. It starts with the whole, you know, this is based on a nun somewhere in Central Europe. And they talked about that in the special features.
Yeah, I guess.
Of course, they like drummed it up, but they bought rights to a story from a newspaper who ran a story about a nun who would like
Killed people?
no, stop being a nun for the day.
Oh, okay.
And
cool.
do that kind of thing, I guess. More or less she was like buying drugs or something.
Hell yeah. there is the aspect of her being a drug addict, which in Killer Nun it's explained by she had a brain tumor that she needed to have removed, and then after the fact she was addicted to morphine and
Yeah. Which we've all suspected, you know, and if you've ever had like your dad yell at you from at the dinner table, like, I'm gonna have an aneurysm, and you're like, this guy has something in his brain, a worm in his brain of evil. That was this nun, dude. Which I guess if you were an orphan and you couldn't project that on your parents, you would feel that about a nun.
yeah.
Because you would be like, no, there's a monster in this woman.
Yeah.
When she's going evil on me. Mm-hmm. But a crazy thing about that movie is Anita Ekberg spoke English. Mm-hmm. And then we watched the movie dubbed in English, and she mentioned years later in the special features, she was like pissed that they dubbed her in English because she spoke English. And I was like, huh. One of my favorite scenes in all of these movies is the one where she smashes dentures of an old woman in a hospital angrily with her feet. She like takes her dentures and destroys them. Yeah, that might have been the kind of thing that might have been a realistic scene.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I could picture that for sure. Because, I mean, even just sitting here in this costume, I could see why these nuns would be pent up and ready to lash out. I mean, they're tied up. They're sucked in tight.
They didn't have as low of a hairline as you, though.
I know.
So they had an easier time with it.
I know. I can't fully hide my hair.
There you go.
Sorry, God. Forgive me.
Spit.
Whip yourself in penance.
But it's a fun genre. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
sure that we will see in the coming years more movies like Immaculate.
Yes.
Less movies maybe like Behind Convent Walls.
Oh, surely.
And maybe another Benedetta or two. Benedetta makes
Yeah.
me want to see Showgirls again.
Should we rank these at all? You want to rank them in order from sinners to saints?
Sinners to Saints. The saint, if there is
Saints?
one, is probably Benedetta.
She's the saint. Yeah, she truly believed.
Yeah, in history.
Yeah.
So I can say, like, she's probably the saint. Do you agree?
Yeah, Benedetta, saint.
Then next, I'd say The Little Hours, because they didn't know any better. That was just historic and comedy.
Okay,
Lighthearted. I can't fault them for that.
true. Fair.
Probably Immaculate was neutral because she was believed, but she birthed the Antichrist, and then she did something about it better.
She murdered it, but she did that because she truly did not want to bring the Antichrist into the world. She didn't believe it would make a better world.
So we can say she's neutral.
Neutral.
Behind Convent Walls, probably a little more
we're
sinner,
at sinner, yeah. We're
but
like
neutral of the sins of like hardcore lust all the time.
You think?
Yeah, like for nuns.
I feel like I would put To Devil a Daughter.
There was a
before.
plot though in this that was evil, and the plot was pretty much successful. No spoilers. But yeah, this was a plot, and they were successful. That's worse than the lusty nuns.
Okay. So this is more sinner.
It's a little more sinner.
And then you'd put Killer Nun as the sinniest of sinners.
Well, we also have the First Omen,
Oh.
which I would put more. It's very close to The Devil a Daughter,
But is it more sinner or
but
more
Natasha
saint?
Kinski was a little hotter.
You can't say that. She was 15.
No, it's true. And then the First Omen and To the Devil a Daughter are the same. It's a little more gnarly, I guess, in the First Omen. There's that scene like possession, right? It's a nastier group. Hard to take them as seriously in the 70s when it was like Christopher Lee,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, the cinniest is probably Killer Nun because she was just a bad lady. She could have just not done that.
And not to reveal the twist, but, you know, even if she wasn't guilty of all the sins, she was still guilty of a lot of sins.
Thank you very much. Hey, like and subscribe. Comment below if we're forgetting any nun movies.
Yeah,
I have an idea that there might be 2 or 3.
Comment your favorite Nunsploitation film below.
Thanks.